Anyway, I am back. You can see the picture there. Reminds me of some of the mandalas that Jung drew back in the day, but it is interesting anyway. Let's see. Where were we? Yeah, it is questionable whether it is the center of the personality. It is part of the personality, but not the whole of it. As I've said, it is simply impossible to estimate how large or how small its share is, how free or how dependent it is on the qualities of this extra-conscious psyche. We can only say that its freedom is limited and its dependence proved in ways that are often decisive. Its freedom is limited and its dependence proved in ways that are often decisive. In my experience, one would do well not to underestimate its dependence on the unconscious. Look, in my experience, one would do well not to underestimate its dependence on the unconscious. Naturally, there is no need to say this to persons who already overestimate the latter's importance. Some criterion for the right measure is afforded by the psychic consequence of a wrong estimate, a point to which we shall return later on. What Jung is saying here is that you have an ego. Don't think that your conscious mind is fully responsible for the ego. A huge part of your ego has its roots in the unconscious. And therefore, the unconscious has a lot of influence on your ego. Influence which your ego may not resist. Therefore, to say that you are fully responsible for it may be a mistake. So he's saying don't underestimate how much of an influence the unconscious has on your ego. We have seen that from the standpoint of psychology of consciousness, the unconscious can be divided into three groups of contents, but from the standpoint of psychology of the personality, a twofold division ensues: an extra-conscious psyche whose contents are personal, and an extra-conscious psyche whose contents are impersonal and collective. The first group comprises contents which are integral components of the individual personality and could therefore just as well be conscious. The second group forces the an omnipresent, unchanging and everywhere identical quality or substrate of the psyche per se. This is, of course, no more than a hypothesis, but we are driven to it by a peculiar nature of the empirical material, not to mention the high probability that the general similarity of psychic processes in all individuals must be based on an equally general impersonal principle that conforms to law, just as the instinct manifesting itself in the individual is only the partial manifestation of an instinctual substance common to all men. What Jung is saying here is you have the unconscious, right? We are saying that the unconscious affects the ego. But what is the unconscious? The unconscious in and of itself comprises roughly of two parts. The first part you might say is your personal unconscious. For example, if something gets repressed, it will go down to your personal unconscious, right? Let's say you had a childhood trauma and because you couldn't handle it, you ended up repressing it, and then it went into the personal unconscious. Or you might have memories, personal memories, then you forget them. What happens to them? They don't disappear, right? They go into your personal unconscious. So you are saying like a certain substrate of the unconscious is personal in nature. But deep down, there is what we call the collective unconscious. Meaning that thing is no longer personal. It is the collective heritage of humanity. And it is the same for all humans. For example, the way I like to think of it, the way I like to think of the collective unconscious is, it is the engine responsible for the sameness of experience. Right? Just because I'm seeing the world a certain way, and you're also seeing it a certain way, and the way we both see it coincides. I'm seeing a table, you also see a table. I see a tree, you also see a tree. What that means is a certain part of our psyche is actually the same. Whether the tree really exists, we don't know. I am hallucinating it, you're also hallucinating it, she is also hallucinating it, and they're also hallucinating it. We are all hallucinating the same thing, and therefore it exists for us. Whether a tree or this table really exists, I don't know. Because the unconscious, I think of it as the world itself is like a black canvas, and the unconscious projects things onto it. And everything you see is in some sense a projection of the unconscious, something from the unconscious. And just because we all see the same things means that a certain part of our unconscious is collective, is projecting the same thing for everyone. And so, for example, sometimes you get certain schizophrenic patients, and certain things went wrong, let's say, and they start seeing different things. Like a schizophrenic patient might look at you and see that you have two horns. No, a question, do you have horns? To me, that question is unanswerable. Because maybe to him I have horns, but to me I don't have it. What does it mean to say whether something really exists? I think we don't know. Because we can only see as far as the unconscious projects. What is beyond that, I don't know. It could very well be the case that we are all patients in a mental hospital with our eyes closed, and we're all hallucinating this. It could very well be the case, right? This is what Ludwig Wittgenstein, I think, was trying to say when these people are trying to study metaphysics, right? Metaphysics beyond what we can perceive. Wittgenstein said that's not possible. What the hell are you guys talking about? All we can see is basically what is projected, and beyond that we don't know. And so when he ends his book with the following quote, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." He's saying that the idea of metaphysics, of the branch of human knowledge known as metaphysics, that cannot exist. We cannot say anything that lies outside our perception and what the unconscious projects. Beyond that, we don't know. Whereof you cannot speak, be silent. You don't know anything about that. And so Jung is saying a certain part of our unconscious, the collective unconscious, is sort of responsible for the sameness of experience. It's like the collective engine of humanity, the collective heritage of humanity. And to show that it exists is not hard. For example, look at the idea of anger. Anger exists in every human being. It's an instinct. When I say the unconscious, think of instinct. Anger existed in mammals also, in monkeys, in other creatures. And so anger is certainly far older than you are. And if you think you can control your anger rather than the other way around, you're mistaken. You haven't been angry enough yet. Let me take your family and torture them in front of you, and then we'll see how well you can manage your anger. So these instincts are really deep, primordial forces that reside in the unconscious. There are like these gods, you can say, because in the Greek world they looked at the instincts as gods, right? The god of sex, the god of love, the god of anger, I don't know, they had a bunch of gods. And so they are very powerful. You cannot fully control them. If you think you can, you're deeply misguided about who you are. And so the unconscious, the collective part, is like this strange land that is infinite, and it's filled with all sorts of strange things like this: instincts, creatures, beings, sub-personalities, right? And they are the same for all of us. I think if you look at humanity as a tree, we are all connected to each other, and I think what connects us is the collective unconscious. So, for example, some people, like my mother, when my grandmother, my mother's mother, was dying, my mother saw it in her dreams. And when she woke up from the dream, she called, and then they were like, yep, she actually died last night. So you see, there is something that connects people, and I think it's the collective unconscious. And if you think about it even further, then it gets interesting, because if the collective unconscious connects all of us, then there might be a way to tap into it and connect to other humans somehow. Do you see what I mean? Like going backwards. Like through the collective unconscious, trying to connect to humanity. Like, it sounds a bit strange, but maybe, who knows, like in a few thousand years, maybe humans can do things like this. We are still in the early stages of these things, so that's what Jung is trying to say, right? A certain part of your unconscious is personal, a certain part of it is collective. And the idea of the collective unconscious is very important for this book. Anyway, now we have the shadow, which would make an interesting read anyway. But let's stop here. I guess, yeah, let's stop here. The video is too long now anyway.